We're coming to you live from the historic Gay Street Theater in beautiful downtown Washington, Virginia. These events are held in conjunction with a series of monthly digital exhibitions of work by Rappahannock County artists. This series of exhibitions is also organized by RAC. The series presents the work of the artists in two-dimensional and three-dimensional galleries online. The exhibitions give you an opportunity to see the artist's work, and these Meet the Artist events give you a chance to hear them talk about their work, what motivates and inspires them, and it gives you insights into how they work and the challenges of making art in the time of COVID. So we'll move on now to meet the individual artists. First up is Nidra Smith. Nidra grew up on her family's farm in the Great Plains of Nebraska, leading to a lifelong love of the outdoors. Her early education was in a one-room schoolhouse in the country, where Fridays were dedicated to art. It's no wonder she knew at an early age that art and the outdoors would be a major part of her life. Nidra is an award-winning artist whose work has been included in juried national exhibitions and included in the Huntsville Museum's collection. Classical training in the arts at George Washington University and studying with some of the top artists in America have both been instrumental in her artistic journey. Nidra says, quote, "While I paint in different genres, first and foremost is my love of plein air painting. Being out in nature and enjoying what each day has to offer is reason alone to pick up the paint box and head into the woods." Impressionistic in style, my work is an effort to stay loose and focus on color notes and light. I'm constantly experimenting with different palettes, lighting, and subject matter, each bringing separate challenges. I'm happiest out of doors with a brush in hand. Nidra, you talk a lot about working outdoors, but do you also work in the studio? Do you bring the paintings back to revise them or finish them?
I do work in the studio. I prefer, if I'm in the studio, to work live, with a live model, or set up a live objects and paint still lifes. But if I paint from photographs, which I do a lot, I do and they give me information that the photographs don't. Photographs are pretty much one-dimensional at best. And painting plein air allows me to study and understand light and how it affects in depth and reflection, and it just gives you more, it gives you a more understanding in the painting process than what I can. So I use my plein air paintings as my information. I guess they're information gathering, plus the wonderful delight of being outside.
Right. So, and what do you find most satisfying as an artist, and what's your biggest challenge?
Oh, wow. One of the things that I find, I think that's really satisfying, is just going into that zone where you kind of are taken away in the creative process. And that peaceful place is just, I love going there. And all of a sudden 2 or 3 hours can go by. But one of the things, every single painting, every single day, that's part of the joy and beauty of art, is the challenge of it, and trying to every time you pick up a brush, how can I make this better than I've done.
You describe your work as impressionistic. Tell us what you understand by impressionistic.
Well, Impressionism started, as I know you know for sure, it started with plein air painting. The first Impressionists it was first when tubes and paint they were able to take it outside on an easier, more simplistic way of going out and studying, the world. And that's where really plein air painting was born out of Impressionism was born out of plein air painting. I try to really stay with color notes. I try to simplify my abstract designs, but I also try to bring, there's a vitality in life that plein air painting that you can get from that it's hard to get anywhere else. And staying loose is something for me that's important. And it seems it's counterintuitive, because you would think that being able to paint loose is an easier approach, but it is a struggle. It's a constant struggle, even after years of trying to get a grip on it.
And I'm wondering, has the COVID-19 pandemic affected your art and you as an artist?
Actually, COVID is actually from an artist standpoint, we are secluded anyway. We, are fairly quiet, and what's COVID done, I hate to say that, a pandemic is a plus, but the plus side of it is that it shut down full elements, and it shut down so many parts of my husband and my life that I am getting to have this really rich time in my studio and in the country. So I has been almost a benefit in that aspect. It's allowed me to absorb, wonderful amounts of time in with my painting, and
Great.
and studying. I try to spend. I paint probably 6 out of 7 days. And then I spend part of the later afternoon either reading and catching up, or watching videos, training videos, but it's really it's fun. To me, it's just a real enjoyable, fun time.
Wonderful. And you're fortunate in working outdoors a lot, because that's probably the safest place to work.
And in Rappahannock, you just turn the pad to learn to, I had to embrace green, that's for sure, because and also I like painting out in Colorado, or I've actually been fortunate to travel the world with my paints. And but this area is difficult because of all the greens and all the atmosphere, and it brings on a challenge that you don't find in other areas of the country.
Right. Well, Nidra, thank you so much for being with us, and it's a pleasure to see your paintings.
Thank you.
Next up is Jennifer Webb. Jennifer is a Rappahannock artist who lives in Amosville and works from her home studio, as well as her studio at Hazel River Artists. She says, quote, "I've been fusing in my home studio since 2003, and I'm attracted to the simple geometry in nature and how I can manipulate that in my glass designs. The collection displayed here are mandalas painted on clear glass. Some of the designs are too layered for depth. The inspiration is the spiral patterns of sunflower seeds, and the blue is for missing being at the beach this summer." I've been selling my work at festivals and at Hazel River Arts and Antiques. I have workshops at Hazel River Art and Antiques every second Saturday, where participants can make their own fused glass sun catchers. Jennifer, welcome. How long have you been an artist, and how did you become an artist? Was there a particular person or event that led you into the arts?
I'd have to say I've been an artist all my life. My mother also is an artist. And so we always just did art. We did silkscreen. We always went out drawing and sketching. She taught sketching to Girl Scout troops that I've been in. And so that's what she told me, you're an artist. So
Yeah.
of course I believed it, and pursued that all through school and high school, and went to art college at Virginia Commonwealth.
Mm-hmm.
I studied jewelry, silversmithing, and ceramics. Then I realized I needed to get a job, so I went into art education and taught art in public schools for a while.
Here in Virginia?
Yeah, in Fairfax County Public Schools.
Uh-huh.
And then I don't know, around 2003, I realized that all the ceramics that I wanted to do that I had never done wasn't getting done, and happened to walk into a stained glass store and realized, oh, this is it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to, from the stained glass, I started fusing, and that's how I really was able to put my designs, the things that are going on in my head when I see nature and think about how I'm going to make it in glass. And it's a cumulative process for me. I just, wherever I go, I'm looking at the pattern, I'm looking at how I could make the depth of it in glass. So
A technical question first. A lot of these are curved forms. Are they made in molds, or do you start out with a curved piece of glass, or how do you get the basic shape down first?
it starts out as a flat piece of glass that's usually 24 by 36, and I slice it down into different shapes that I need. These here are cut into circles and squares and rectangles, and they're 2 layers of glass. So on a couple of them, I've painted on both layers, and then they're fired together flat. And then the second or third firing is they're fired into or over a ceramic mold to give it its shape.
Mm-hmm.
So everything is a flat design before it becomes the convex or concave shape that it becomes.
Uh-huh. And when you say the colors in 2 layers, you actually put the colored elements between the lower and the upper layer, but also on top of the upper layer?
Correct. These particular paints need to be fired on for example, if I painted on the lower level and then just stuck a piece of glass on it and then painted on the top and then fired them both together, that middle layer, the paint in there would not, it wouldn't fire properly. It would create air bubbles.
Uh-huh.
So what I've got to do is cure each layer and then fire them together.
I see. Okay. And we're seeing the shadow of the color and the underneath it, right? So
yeah, isn't that cool? I like it.
Yeah, great. Do you have dry spells when you're not so productive, and how do you get out of these situations?
True. It happens. You just get to a spot where just nothing is coming, and for people who cut glass, sometimes that just means there's a whole lot of broken glass and you really need to just step away. So I go out in my gardens. I'll plant things, I'll cut things, I'll weed, I'll do all kinds of things in the yard. I've got a bunch of acres, so there's plenty to do all the time. I try and maybe go kayaking or hike up in the Shenandoahs, something like that. And that gets me out there looking at the different patterns in nature. And before long, I can get back in the studio, and I've got a series in my head already.
Oh, great. Are you often work in series like this with repeated shapes, or?
Yeah, usually there's an idea, and I have to work through it, and it ends up being a series or an evolution. And then once I've done it, I'm off to another thing. There's just no mass production. Each one is individually done, and until I've just done the whole, everything that comes out of me.
And what size are these particular works that we're looking at here?
These right here are pretty small. They're 2 by 3 or 4 inches, or the circle is about 4.5 inches.
Mm-hmm.
And it was designed that to see what I liked about it first. And I thought then I would go larger. And the more I did it in the small scale, I decided that maybe it wouldn't convey larger. So I didn't.
And same question I asked Nidra, how is the COVID-19 pandemic affecting you and your art?
Yeah, well, for one thing, it's good to be alone in your studio, as Nidra said, and just work and work and work, and you get to that place where you have no idea what time it is or how long you've been there. But the COVID, in terms of selling things, people aren't allowed to go out. They're not allowed to go to festivals. I do about 5 or 6 festivals towards the fall season, and no festivals, no income. And so I'm hoping that once we get back into a more healthy state for everybody, that we can all go out and touch all the things that we want to touch, and people will be looking forward to it, I think.
Yeah, people like to see and touch what they're going to record, I guess.
Yeah, and a lot of times texture is something that I build into it because people are drawn to the texture. And it's funny because, a lot of moms go, "Oh, that's glass, don't touch it." And I, depending upon who the mom is, I'll tell them, yeah, it's okay, you can touch it, you can feel it, because kids are just really drawn to touching. Well, adults too, yeah.
Well, thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you very much.
It's been great to have you with us.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Next up is Anita Zamolka. Anita grew up in East Germany and escaped just a day before the Berlin Wall went up. Together with her husband, a diplomat, she's lived, studied, and exhibited extensively overseas. She and her husband moved from Seattle back to Virginia, settling in Rappahannock County. Anita says, quote, "Nature, color, details, and music inspire my paintings, which can turn out to be realistic, imagined, or both. Whatever the style, I like to portray the beauty of all of nature's creatures, real or imagined, big or small, to remind us of the important part each of them contribute to the existence and preservation of our environment. I usually start with a random color scheme on the paper, and then let my feelings, imagination, and intuition guide me to a finished painting. My favorite time of day is when I'm painting while listening to classical music. You need to look closely at my paintings, as there is much to be discovered. It will make you smile and brighten your day." Anita is represented by the Middle Street Gallery in Washington, Virginia. The Middle Street Gallery is an artist-owned art gallery that was established in 1983. The gallery's mission is to support quality and innovation in the arts and to promote the work of its members. As a nonprofit cooperative, it also strives to foster interaction and collaboration among members and non-member artists and the general public. Anita also has works currently on display at Silver Maples Gallery in Washington, Virginia. Anita, how do you decide what to paint and how do you begin a work?
Okay, I will tell you, this is, I have to go into my studio, put on my beautiful classic radio. It has to be classic music, and then start picking out the colors and make also first a complete wet paper. I have very good paper, so I can do that wet, and when it's dry, I will put color on it and then make it wet maybe again. So it's just how I feel and how the music is bringing me to something. Then I start, when it's all dry, I have a very, it's a liner brush, very, very thin brush. I never use a pencil or any kind of drawing underneath. I just start when I see the colors, look at it very closely. What can I do with it and what does it say to me? So sometimes I see birds, I see animals, I have done anything what looks like what comes out of my color. And then it will take quite a while until it's finished. It really, sometimes I look again and again, but I will not start another painting until this is finished, because otherwise I get into something else again. So I really love the watercolor because I have studied and got a real traditional painting in school, and later on when Hans and I were all over the world, I took classes from everybody. I did porcelain and silk, and I actually, all the mediums I tried, and in the end, I really thought watercolor is for me, because if you travel, it's the lightest material, you just pack it, and if you have oil or something, you cannot travel that much with it. So I am very happy that I found this, and I am also happy that I do not have to look at something and copy it. I hate to copy now. Now I always say, I do it my way, and I don't care what people think. If they like it, it's good. They should know that I am so happy when I paint. I cannot say, what will I do if I cannot paint anymore? It's the most beautiful thing for me that I have freedom on it. It's just beautiful. I wished everybody else could do the same.
So you start with the color and then you draw on top of that.
Right.
But it sounds like you sometimes pick out images that are already in the color, that you allow the shapes of the color to determine the image you draw on top of it.
Exactly. When I see some shape because of the color, I say, oh, this looks like a bird, this looks like a flower, this looks like maybe a butterfly. Starting there, most of the time I start on my left corner like I'm writing a letter. So I'm starting there and I fill in suddenly what I see, and it just comes. And I don't know before what I have in mind at all. It's a surprise every time for me. And I just love that way of working, because nobody can say, why you do this? Why you do that? You should do this. I cannot believe that people did not even know that you can paint like that, that you just give your inners and say, this is what I like, and I'm happy. Every day I'm happy.
And how do you know when a painting is finished?
That is a very good question. I look at it over and over to maybe say, oh, there, I could do something more there and there. And I have to cut myself loose and say, this is it now. That's the only way you can do it.
Mm. And are your birds and your bugs based on real
Oh, yeah.
creatures or all entirely invented?
I show you. I have all kinds of, I cannot show you, bugs, collecting bugs. My daughter brings me some. I
Uh-huh.
find them on my patio or something, and I get them all and look at them very close. This is here. I mean, it's amazing what I collected. One
Uh-huh.
minute, I cannot show it. And I'm very careful with it. Wait a minute, where are you? Here. They all, it's such a, it's not good to see it. Can you see it? No, wait a minute. There. And when I look at them, I actually, you know, they're dead and everything, but I can see enough what they really look like, how many legs they have. I never knew before that a spider has 8 legs. I didn't realize that before. And I actually collect them all, and I'm not scared. And sometimes, you know, they're alive still, so I keep them a while in a glass, and then afterwards I let them go again. And I actually like all the little animals, what you can find, the insects. And I always say I'm actually, if you paint maybe trees or mountains or anything else, I am painting the close up from the world, from the earth. The smallest little animals you can see, I make them bigger or something. But I want people to see that it is important also to cherish these animals very much, and they're good for our ecosystem, really.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always put in something more like a little story lately, because this one here has a castle, and a man on a horse is helping this young girl to run away from the dragon. And then underneath a cow and what you call it, a donkey.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just, I don't know, I never think about it until I paint. And then it's like writing a letter and you're not finished yet. So then I go and continue.
So when
So,
you want people to sort of discover these narratives in the painting,
right.
look
I
closely
hope,
and-
that they go close with glasses, look at it very close, and every day you will see something new again in there.
Mm.
And you say, oh my gosh, I haven't seen that before, because you've got to really look into it and not just say, oh, what is this? You know, you have to really go back into it.
We have a question from one of our participants, which is, how do you get the white lines? Is that white paint?
Yeah, it is white paint, and after I'm finished with the painting, I will use the white paint and go over again. That's why it takes so long. And always this very line brush, it's a liner called a liner, and has maybe a couple of hairs in there, and it's very tedious, but I love that, because the music actually helps me, that I keep calm and that I can paint. And I'm already scared that when I get much older, that my hand might be not so stable like it is still, you know. You have to be very careful when you draw. But you see, I learned how to do porcelain painting, silk painting. I did tiles. I did actually anything you can think of. But then I found that this watercolor is for me the best. You know? But you have to be patient. I mean, it's nothing that you can do in a minute or something.
So
Really.
you've worked in many different media. You just painting on silk and
Yes, and porcelain was ja. Jetzt hat der Hans mich hier abgewuschelt. Okay. No, I think also you see here now the bug in there. It's actually big, and it's just a fly. and I made this big bug and I love it so much. And you see the man and the woman next to it here. So I always sometimes put a couple of people in there, sometimes something unexpected, sometimes broken animals. I have done, butterflies with only one wing hanging or some, but, I always invent something. And then naturally the real bugs come out. And then I do that in between because I want also people to see that I can paint realistic, very realistic. And I love the bugs so much. And the flowers come in between. I have done paintings with what you call high rise and everything, bridges, but I back to fantasy. Fantasy is my thing.
Great. Well, Anita, thank you so much for sharing with us. It's really
okay, you're welcome.
intriguing to see your work through your eyes. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, then I cut this.
And then you can just hit mute again. All right, Priscilla Long Whitlock is next. Priscilla Long Whitlock is a Virginia artist who's located near the Blue Ridge Mountains in Albemarle County, Virginia. Priscilla says, quote, "After years of painting, my interest is to interpret landscape. The subject matter is about physicality and energy of the paint and less about landscape as scenery. Produced by the painted marks, dashes, swipes of oil, and oil stick, shapes and color all come together to represent the mood, light, and sense of place. From a close vantage point, the work is most abstract, but viewed from a distance, it comes together to represent a field, marsh, or view." Priscilla Long Whitlock is represented by Cottage Curator in Sperryville, Virginia, an independent art gallery owned by artist-curator Jackie Bailey Labovitz. As a curator with over 30 years experience in organizing art collections for corporations, embassies, and public spaces around the world, Jackie now assists residential clients with the purchase and placement of her own art, as well as artworks by other local, regional, and nationally recognized fine art and craft artists. Priscilla, welcome. Of your works in this exhibition, do you have a favorite? And tell us what you're trying to achieve with it and describe the techniques you use to create it.
Thank you, John. It's great to be here. Usually an artist does not say that they have a favorite work. Usually my favorite work is the one I'm working on right now, right this minute. But in this particular collection, I like the one called Blues Tidal Wash, and it is a diptych, a two-piece panel of water. And it was painted on site, begun on site at 2 different times. I like having a viewpoint of standing in the landscape. I love working in nature, being outside, and feeling a part of it. And I want the viewer also to be standing right there looking at it. But it doesn't look like a photograph because I want the viewer to also be aware of the fact that it's paint. And
are these actual marshes or imagined marshes? And are they, if they're actual, are they freshwater, saltwater? Where are they?
this is a real place, and there is another painting in this show that was done from that same place. Every time I go back to this place, it's the one to the right of it, the painting to the right. All through the different times of year. This is on a small, called a spoil island off the coast of North Carolina. And I load everything onto my husband's little scout boat, a big easel and all of the equipment, and wade in. And during the extreme high tides that we've had all up and down our coast, we're all aware of what's happening environmentally. Actually, this is the beauty of it, because the interior ponds flood and they become like a mirror. And so you can actually see all the way across the island to the intercoastal waterway, and I just stand right there while the water comes in and goes out.
So you're literally standing in the water?
No, but it appears that I am, doesn't
Yeah.
it? So the diptych to the left was actually chosen by Arts and Embassies by the ambassador, the United States ambassador to Riga, Latvia. And she had it for about 3 years. And when it came home, cottage curator asked for it. It's just still a favorite because I love this place and it evokes wonderful memories of being there.
Hmm. On the RAC website, you talk about how the marshes flood and bloom like a field. How do you mean that? How do they bloom?
If you look at the painting on the left, which is a field, I think what I probably mean is that I treat them in a similar manner when I'm painting.
Mm-hmm.
That if you just change the color, that could be the abstract part of what you saw
Mm-hmm.
in the marsh.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just really a series of color and marks, darks and lights. It's just that
So,
what happens with some of the paintings is we recognize what that subject matter is.
mm-hmm.
So it's drawing a line between abstraction and realism.
Mm-hmm. So what artists have influenced you in your work over the years? If you're drawn both to abstract painting and to representational images, who've been your influences?
Well, one of my favorite painters recently is Joan Mitchell.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I started in school with formal training and, had favorites all the way along. Monet still continues to be a favorite, and I visited his work in Paris, and the scale and the brushwork are just so gorgeous. I fell in love with Wolf Kahn. I like his the pieces that he did, particularly in Africa, where if I can't see what you're seeing, but Wolf Kahn did a whole series where it's like being in, you can't really tell what's going on up close. So you're very aware of the paint, the marks, and it's the same way with Joan Mitchell. I studied with Eric Aho.
Mm-hmm.
And he is a wonderful New York painter with a show in a DC gallery right now. He makes very strong shapes. If you look at this painting that they're showing on the screen right now, that would be based on an artist like Fairfield Porter. And I think he has influenced many wonderful artists over the years. So, I mean, we could trace a line all the way back to Giotto and the Italians.
Does your technique differ when you're trying to represent clouds and sky from when you're representing fields and water?
The fields that appear to be more busy are those strong underneath shapes are filled with more colored marks.
Mm-hmm.
But actually it's the very same approach.
Mm-hmm. And do you ever have dry spells when you can't work, and what do you do about that?
I do, and I used to really worry about it, and especially if there was a big, important upcoming show and a lot of pressure, and I felt like I had to make the best work I could ever make. So what I usually do is start working in another medium. I play around with cold wax. I'll get out watercolors. I'll make monotypes. I visit a museum and just work my way into it and through it just by drawing, and then you start to look again and trust yourself, believe in yourself, and I think it really helps to look at other artists and realize that they've probably gone through exactly the same thing.
Yeah. Well, it certainly looks like you've been productive lately, so it's great to see your work. Thank you so much, Priscilla.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it.
You bet. Next up is Margaret Rogers. Margaret Rogers' studio is located on the Thornton River in Sperryville, Virginia. Her workplace, which is equipped with a Griffin etching press, is tucked behind the family's coffee roasting business. The themes in her work are nature and familiar rural scenes, and the woods and rivers surrounding the studio are a designated wildlife habitat, which attracts plenty of interesting subjects to draw. Although she's mainly a printmaker, her work includes illustration, graphite, and botanical drawings. Dry point, aquatint, monotypes, and etchings are some of the techniques she uses. She's represented in local galleries and has exhibited at art shows in Washington, D.C., Richmond, and Charlottesville. Margaret is unable to be with us this evening and sent the following statement about her work. The materials and methods I use for my work haven't changed from when intaglio engraving first emerged in the early 1400s. Goldsmiths were decorating armor, religious items, and musical instruments. The German artists Albrecht Dürer and Daniel Hopfer were two of the earliest artists who exploited the copperplate engraving and use of ferric chloride etching in the late 15th and early 16th centuries. Zinc plates and nitric acid have become more popular in modern printmaking studio, but I prefer the long-standing tradition and put my knuckle to the copper plate. When the sharp dry point stylus drags through the soft metal to raise the burr, I'm encouraged to know the engravers Dürer and Rembrandt performed the same motions. To find the best way to render both delicacy and vastness of a landscape or capture figures in a small dry point etching is a unique challenge. My knuckle settles on the copper plate carefully, not to disturb the wax crayon sketch on the polished surface. A sharp dry point stylus is held firmly in place. Work begins by dragging that stylus across the copper, raising the burr, which looks ragged and irregular. There will be fewer printed editions due to the fragility of that burr. The beauty of the dry point print is the appealing softness in the picture, as you see in these images of nethers and old rag. Returning to her text, quote, "This type of etching is closest to drawing in spite of its shortcomings. No nitric acid drips or chemical grounds to work with, so that in that respect, it is also healthier for you. Traditional engraving with gravers and metal tip pens is clean, precise, sure to pull a print without too many issues, and the burr is wiped away." Dictionary definitions for drawing, quote, "A picture or diagram made with a pencil, pen, or crayon rather than paint." This is a very modest description. It hardly covers the vast domain of drawing. Drawing and dry point are obviously different, but look very alike. Both disciplines are executed carefully in order to lay a line with either a sharp metal stylus or a mechanical or wooden pencil, leads 9H to 9B, black and color. The last thing I'll share with you is my deep, abiding respect for the power of art, the art of creating art, and practitioners of art, new and old. Artists affect social changes. We document life in our world. This belief makes my work relevant. That's the end of Margaret's text. We'll spend another minute looking at her work. And then we move on to the Old Rag photography group. The Old Rag Gallery is a cooperative with 3 members, Ray Bach, Joyce Harmon, and Francie Schroeder, who all find inspiration in the local environment and in their travels, both imagined and real. Joyce Harmon and Francie Schroeder are featured in the exhibition this evening. We'll start with Joyce Harmon, who I hope has been able to join us. She was having trouble with her internet at home and went to a hotspot. Are you there, Joyce?
Yes, I am.
Great, welcome back.
Good old Rappahannock internet.
Yeah, right. Joyce Harmon was born and raised in Washington, D.C., but her time was always spent in the country riding horses. She became a veterinarian in 1984, then worked in England and Ireland for quite a few years before coming back to the States. Currently, she owns Harmony Equine Clinic in Flint Hill, Virginia, a practice devoted to holistic medicine for horses, though she sees a few small animals and naturally raised livestock as well. During all her education and travels, her camera was never far away, though she had no formal training until the mid-1990s, when she decided to begin studying photography seriously. She's exhibited in several galleries and has photographs in numerous private collections. Joyce is a founding member of the Old Rag Photography Gallery. Her images have won competitions locally and nationally. She teaches photography classes at the Old Rag Gallery and judges at camera clubs in the area. Joyce, why did you all choose to open a gallery in Rappahannock?
Well, we started back around the time when the art tour got started. Me and Francie Schroeder and Ray Bach. And over the years, we've had a few other people join us and work with us. But the 3 of us have really hung together because we enjoy the photographic process. We enjoy the printing. We all grew up in the era of when printing, you know, there was nothing digital back then. Everything was done with printing. And so we really like to finalize our pictures and not just leave them on the computer, but get them out into the public. And we're all inspired to photograph locally, and we enjoy each other's company. So we have kept together as a gallery. We've moved around to different locations in the county, and we have we've enjoyed our time as a group.
And so you do all your own printing?
I do all my own printing. I do some of the works that are here are actually printed on aluminum, which I do contract out for because you need big fancy equipment. I've been very inspired by printing big pictures on aluminum because it adds a depth to an image that paper just doesn't quite do. And it lets you get right up to the photograph and not be, not have a piece of glass between you and the photograph, to have that little bit of extra depth that metal offers.
Mm-hmm.
And, but all my paper printing, I just love to see the print form as it comes out of the printer.
Mm-hmm. You say you can get closer to these on aluminum because you don't need the glass to protect the image?
Yes, the aluminum process is the actual print put onto aluminum, and there is just a finish over it that makes it actually quite durable. But I mean, you can literally touch it, whereas when you have a print that's behind glass, it just has a little different feel to it.
Yeah. You achieve such an interesting perspective in these photographs. Is that from a wide angle lens, or how do you get these such radical perspectives in these?
it's interesting, the collection that I put together, because I love trees, and wide angle lenses and lying on the ground a lot is actually what gets me these types of views. So I like the image of the fall colors in the trees. I'm literally just lying on my back looking for patterns in the trees with the colors and the leaves. And sometimes I have to get up and move around a few different times to get the right collection of the right pattern, the right collection of colors and clouds. The black and white of the tree, I actually had to put the camera on the ground with a fisheye lens and take a picture and then look at it and then see if I had gotten what I wanted, because I was not actually able to look through the lens while I was taking the picture.
So it was a mystery.
It was a mystery, and believe me, there were probably 10 or 15 that showed either the rock or the roots or something other than what I was after.
Yeah. And how has your photography changed over the years, or has it?
It's interesting to look back over what I've been interested in, because it seems to go in sort of 2-year cycles, from starting with a lot of bugs and macro photography, flowers, detailed, little tiny details around the farm, to a phase of time in which I was looking at mostly moving the camera and creating total abstracts and just looking for colors and shapes. And then I've lately been doing much more wide angle work, because I'm sort of seeing the world on a larger scale right now.
You've also been doing a lot of night photography lately, haven't you?
Yes, and that's been my other major passion lately, and spent a lot of nights out under the stars. Had a great time photographing a whole series around Rappahannock County under the stars at night. So if you ever see a car parked by the side of the road, that might be me taking pictures of various iconic buildings, trees, things like that are over by the side of the road. And I find the night sky just a fascinating subject. And also it's a very interesting technical challenge, because there really is a lot of the new technology that's what allows us to photograph the night sky. So it's sort of challenging my brain in a different way.
Is it old-fashioned kinds of timed exposures, or the new technology allows different kinds of image capture?
Well, the idea is time. It's still, to do night photography, you still need time and a tripod, but the modern sensors can pick up the detail that was very, very difficult to achieve back in the film days.
Oh, great. Well, Joyce, thank you. We'll move on now to your compatriot, old rag photography, Francie Schroeder. Thank you, Joyce.
Thank you, John.
Upon returning from Brazil as a Peace Corps officer, Francie Schroeder attended Brooks Institute of Photography, where she studied commercial techniques using large format cameras, studio lights, film, and darkroom chemicals. But as life continued, she made the transition to small cameras, mostly handheld, and to digital photography. For many years, she shared a photo studio in Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. with her husband, Henry Eastwood. She worked as a photographer for the Smithsonian, the National Zoo, and the Archives of American Gardens. She and Henry relocated to Rappahannock County, Virginia in the mid-1980s, where they started a specialty tree nursery that continues to this day. She continued her photography throughout, and making the transition from film to digital occupied her nights and wee small morning hours for some time. Francie still loves fine silver and chrome prints, but the textures that she also loves are still there, and digital facilitates new possibilities. She's been a member of Old Rag Photography since 2011. Francie, let's talk about the transition to digital for a second. You talk about missing silver and chrome prints, but you say the textures are still there. But how do you mean that? The
Well, I
texture.
think the detail in a photograph brings out the textures, and I think it's one of the things I've always really loved. I mean, it's something that makes a photograph almost sensual, and it's different, the old prints, but you still get, you know, a sense of texture, and actually you can add all different kinds of textures through Photoshop if you want. But
And you say digital facilitates new possibilities. Joyce was just talking about how it's changed nighttime photography. What are some of the new possibilities you've noticed in digital photography?
well, I think you can control your lights and your darks a lot more. So, you know, there's a wider range of darks and light that you can bring together on a computer. So in, you know, film photography, you would probably have to sacrifice either some shadow or highlighted areas. Whereas digitally, you can kind of recover it. Not always, but most of the time. I mean, if you really screw up your exposure, you won't get it. But some of the other things, I mean, a lot of times I do composites and I work in layers in a way that you can't do, you know, digital makes it easy to do that.
Layers of different images, or layers of different colors when you say you work
well,
in
both, but actually I can, like it's not in this particular group, but I was driving around Canada one summer and I was amazed by all the different colors of the crops in the fields. And when I got back, I took 15 of them and just stacked them in different layers in a pattern, which I could not, you know, if I could have done it the other way, I could have printed them out separately and then pasted them up, which is something I actually did do in the past. But
and of the works in the exhibition, do you have a favorite? And tell us what you're trying to achieve with it. And
right, I don't see the one I was going to say I was going to call as my favorite. It's the old schoolhouse. Maybe it's not here. So there's just the three, right? Yeah. So the old schoolhouse, the pub window is also part of the same series. And I spent a lot of time over the last several years photographing restaurants. I mean, there's a part of me that is just a basic street photographer. And these restaurants, none of them were corporate owned. They were all owned by small people. And I think about these people now with COVID because so many of them must have closed down. You know, whenever we would drive, we would always pick out these small family-run businesses, restaurants to eat in. This one here, the pub window, was one in San Francisco, and I was just walking by and was attracted to that. Sometimes I would just photograph the interior, sometimes the food, sometimes the people. I mean, restaurants serve such a huge purpose in people's lives. And the more I photographed them, the more I would see it, you know, like lonely people go there. One time I was in a Friendly's restaurant and there were 2 booths that were reserved for a bride. And she came in her white dress and, you know, with her family in different booths. It's interesting. And I mean, as a sociologist in my background, you know, I find them really interesting. Sometimes I ask people to pose for me, and sometimes they're just you know, I sneak up on people.
Like this family group
Because
who's late on the
on the
So
beach.
you said you were trained as a sociologist. Do you have a idea of what the role of art and artists is in society? It's a huge question, but
it is a huge question, and it's very interesting. I mean, we've been talking around COVID a lot tonight. I was with my son and his girlfriend last weekend, and I asked them what they thought the role of art was, and they both, just without thinking, said distraction. And I thought, yeah, that's why people are using it now. I think a lot of art to distract themselves, you know, from just the political conflicts right now. And then I thought back to my earliest memory of having a relationship with art, and it was as a young child at my grandmother's Sunday brunch table, and I would get bored and I would just look at this painting on the wall and focused on it. And I mean, I can still see that painting in my mind's eye. So there's that. But I mean, it's more than distraction, though. I mean, it's as simple as, hey, look at that, to an expression of deep, you know, emotional response to what's happening around you and in your personal life, and a sharing of that. So it's community oriented, you know. It sometimes the artist can express for the whole community what they're feeling.
Yeah. Well, I think you drew out some of this in talking about the pub window, where you talk both about the people who occupy the space and use the space, but also the fate of the people who work there. So I think that you're aware of the sort of both art as a refuge and as a sort of recorder of social realities.
Yeah, I mean, it's overwhelming. I mean, it can be an expression of joy or expression of trauma. I mean,
yeah. Well, Francie, thank you so much. We've gone a little bit over time, and I want to take a minute to thank everyone. We've had a wonderful series of 6 of these events, and I want to thank both tonight's artists and the artists who've been involved in the previous 5 Meet the Artist sessions. I also want to thank Matthew Black, the extraordinary president of the Rappahannock Association for the Arts in the Community, for his tireless efforts on behalf of the arts in Rappahannock. Jennifer Tepper, our tech wizard, who's put together these incredible 3-dimensional and 2-dimensional exhibitions. I want to thank Dick and Nancy Rains for providing the space in the theater in Washington for us to use for these events. And Rick and Kay Kohler, who also have an office in the building, who provided us with what was usually a reliable internet connection. A reminder to our guests that you can view these exhibitions anytime at your leisure. Remember, all the work in the exhibition is available for purchase directly from the artists or their galleries. Remember, you can enter detail view by clicking directly on an image, and you can get information on each work by clicking on the eye on the right-hand side of the screen when you're in detail view.
Right.
And then you can go back and exit detail view in the right-hand corner of the exhibition. Contact information for each artist is provided in the information on each work in case you have questions or want to inquire about any work. Thanks again to RAC, the Rappahannock Association for Arts in the Community, for hosting these virtual art exhibitions, which will continue to be on display at fallarttour.org. Finally, note that the annual Fall Art Tour, one of the premier events in Virginia, which has been going on now for 16 years, will be different due to COVID-19 this year and the necessity of social distancing. This year's tour has evolved from an in-person event to a Virtual Arts Expo 2020, which will debut on November 14th. It'll be similar to the two-dimensional virtual exhibitions hosted by RAC this summer, but the Arts Expo will feature work from many more of our local artists and galleries with information about information for inquiries and purchase. Many artists and galleries will be shipping work directly to collectors. Other galleries and artist studios will be open by appointment for viewing and pickup of art. So you'll want to contact individual artists for their plans. So look for this virtual exhibition premiering November 14th and visit fallarttour.org for more information. Thanks again to all our participants. It's been a wonderful series of events and a great opportunity to learn a lot more about the vibrant arts community in Rappahannock County. Thank you and good night.